let's say, the ill thought out actions and life force of the individual who's suffering. And we see, I think, a good deal of this is the common conservative complaint against the liberals. That, let's say, parties X and Y were not responsible in their lives. Now they're suffering mightily, and we are to leap in the breach. And so, how would an argument like the one that you have mentioned, cope with that particular issue? And as well, if there is an element of utilitarianism that is attached to it, that is, and I assume that utilitarianism still has some aspect of the greatest number, that it's a goal to strive for, that one maximizes, let's say, the effect by numbers of individuals. Can the individuals be counted as equal units? And there it becomes particularly problematic, I think, when it comes to non-human species. And those who counter, let's say, animal rights arguments say, well, shall we extend those rights to ants? Shall we extend them to shrimp? On what basis? And then how does one measure merit or worth? And I would propose that this particularly reflects back to the human situation because, let's say, blunt biology, or let's say DNA-based arguments about our equality, not innate, let's say not innate nature in the essentialist sense, but let's say that we all share more or less the same DNA, therefore makes us all more or less equally, equally equivalent moral units. And that's problematic because any species is always speciating, and so there is no such thing, I think, as a homogeneous species at any one time. There are tendencies in all possible directions, and so the utilitarian argument, I think, assumes a certain equivalency of units, and that's problematic for animal rights, and it's even, I think, problematic for let's say, measuring one human against another in terms of his or her meritworthiness for our attentions, our sympathetic attentions. So there's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. I don't know if I can address it all, but it's ironic that the animal rights movement calls Peter Singer's book, Animal Liberation, the Bible of the animal rights movement, when Singer himself denounces animal rights. His argument is not based on animal rights. His argument is not based on maximizing happiness. It's based on minimizing pain. So his argument is, by eating meat, we're being immoral because we don't need to support the industries, the factory farms, which are horrendous. Part of his argument is visual, using pictures. Here's what goes on in factory farms, right? If we don't know what goes on in factory farms, it's very easy to eat meat and say, well, we become very desensitized. But when people actually see what goes on, they become horrified. Their human instincts get triggered, and that's where the behavior often changes. And so, yeah, Singer is not about maximizing anything. He's a negative utilitarian, and I think it's a very viable. It's a more viable brand of utilitarianism that we shouldn't try to be maximizing happiness, because the argument goes, well, what if we just desensitize animals and then kill them and eat them? His argument is, we need to minimize pain. But yeah, he does treat all sentient beings as morally equal. They all have equal interests. To be sentient means to have interests. So he treats all sentient beings as morally equal. We need to take your interests into account. Sometimes we have moral dilemmas. If I'm living in the Arctic, I can't farm. Right? If I'm a native, I can't farm. I've got to hunt and fish. Right? And so his argument isn't against that. It's against you and me in civilization, where our food is prepared for us by these horrendous slaughterhouses. A silent holocaust going on around us every day, every moment. Right? And that's his argument. Now, this is easily extended to human social issues, and he does that himself. So he's a very powerful thinker. The standard criticisms against utilitarianism do not apply to him. But I gave Singer as an example of, if we get rid of the idea of humor, and it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It might happen 1,000 years from now, or 500 years. But even if we do get rid of the idea, the natural answer, the reply is, so then what are we going to do? Then what's going to be the foundation of social activism, if not human rights? And so I gave Peter Singer as an example. Well, here's an example. I'm not saying it's the only example, but it's a pretty powerful one. Negative utilitarianism.
Well, but then again,
Next
what
question.
yeah, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Can I just remind those asking questions to please stand as close to the microphone as you can?
Okay. Or just crank up my own volume.
Exactly.
Help. Almost every one of our climate signals that we're getting is onto the worst side. I'll make it short. Do you see how your perspective can help us get onto a more sustainable path?
We're talking about the environment and global warming.
Yeah, and I'll just do a
pollution.
little recap.
Right.
Greenhouse gases, we're outside our worst case scenario.
Right.
Arctic ice melting, outside the worst case scenario, it's melting much quicker than we anticipated. Ocean acidification, outside the worst case scenario. Sea level rise, outside.
Right. You're not going to like my answer.
Take it as
Nobody likes my answer. But a philosopher of science and a quasi-historian of science. And this might not seem relevant to what we're talking about right now. Maybe it isn't, but it's certainly interesting.
Human rights, the same planet.
It's an interesting spin on things. When I look at the modern debate about global warming, it reminds me enormously of something that went on roughly 25 years ago. The debate over the extinction of the dinosaurs. Now, you had the experts, the paleontologists, saying that the dinosaurs went extinct because of terrestrial changes that we can observe now. They were the uniformitarians, the gradualists, right? Then along came a group of outsiders, Louis and Walter Alvarez and a few others, the physicists. Outsiders who came into the world of the experts, saw something the experts missed, iridium at the KT boundary, and the shit hit the fan, right? The experts were saying, this is our domain. There's a territoriality among experts, academics, right? But you look at the debate, and guess what? The tide of expert opinion shifted in favor of the outsiders. Evidence grew and grew and grew, and basically the Alvarez team has won with some qualifications, right? Now I look at the global warming debate, right? You've got the experts, the climatologists. Al Gore says they're all united on this conclusion, right? Every scientific article by climatologists has said it's man-made global warming. Right? David Suzuki on 640 radio with the morning guy. John Oakley, thank you. Right? John Oakley. He says to John Oakley and the listeners, the science is in. And John Oakley says, well, there are some scientists who disagree. And Suzuki gets red in the face and storms out of there. Right? The science is not in. In fact, there's the same sort of thing seems to be happening as 25 years ago with the dinosaur extinction. You've got the experts, the climatologists, who have their view, or had their view, past tense even, man-made global warming. Right? Outsiders, solar scientists, have now been coming in saying, wait, there's growing evidence that it's changes in solar activity that is a major, if not the major cause in